Okay, so we started talking about different types of angles. We have just what an angle is. We talked about a right angle, which measures exactly 90 degrees, and acute angle, which measures less than 90. Let's talk about some different types of angles. So we've run out of room here on our vocab page. We need another. So let's continue. If you have an angle that measures bigger than 90 degrees, for example, start with the picture this time. Look how wide that opening is. All right, that's called an obtuse angle. And it is an angle that is greater than 90 degrees. So if it's 90.3, it becomes an obtuse angle. Right? If it's 152, that's an obtuse angle. Now, obviously, if you took this piece of the angle and pushed it this way, it would eventually get so big and so wide that you'd have a straight line. So if you measured in degrees from one part all the way to the other part, I'm wondering if you know how many degrees that would measure. Also, would you know how many degrees it measured if you started here and went all the way back around in a circle back to where you started? Now, some of you might already know that 360 is the degrees of a circle. So if you just went halfway, what is that? Okay. If you went halfway, you'd get something that looked like this, wouldn't you? Where you start here and you measure it all the way to there, essentially half a circle. That's 180 degrees. Okay, that's called a straight angle. Okay, and it's essentially just a straight line. So there will be 180 degrees along any line, which is something which will come up a lot in geometry, okay, as we move on. Okay, let's talk about some other terms that we will need and which are very important. This is a big one. This word is congruent. Congruent in geometry means same measure. So it gets a little tricky when you use the words equal and congruent. But we want to use congruent when we're comparing some things and wanting to see whether things are the same measure. So there's a symbol for congruent, and it's the equal sign, and it's got a squiggly over the top. That squiggly is called a tilde, but I just call it a squiggly for our purposes. If you write this symbol, you don't have to write the word congruent. That's what this symbol means. So if I created sort of a little math sentence down here, if I said line segment AB, and I put that sign, and then line segment CD, what that means is that line segment AB is congruent to line segment CD. That's a lot to write. All these words, you could just make a math sentence that looks like that. It means the same thing. It means if AB is 6 inches, CD is also 6 inches, right? They have the same measure, so they're congruent. So that may be a new word for you. The next couple of words are probably not new. The next word is parallel. Perhaps some of you have been trying to drive and you're doing parallel parking. Okay. So when we talk about parallel, we're usually talking about lines. So parallel means lines that do not meet or intersect. So here's a line here. Here's a line here. Those lines are parallel lines. In fact, if you try to parallel park, if this is your car, you're trying to park it as close to that curb as you can. So you're doing a parallel park. So there's some symbols for this too. Let's put some dots or some points on these lines. This could be line AB. This could be line CD. And we're not going to know whether these are parallel unless there's some symbols here. So the way that we would use symbols to show that line AB is parallel to line CD is we do line AB with arrows. And then the parallel sign, parallel to CD. Notice the parallel sign. You don't have to write it out in words. You can use the symbols, just like we did up here with congruent. Next word is perpendicular. You don't want to be perpendicularly parking because you would probably be sticking out into the road quite a bit. So perpendicular, again, are pairs of lines. They're lines that intersect at right angles, 90-degree angles. So the lines will cross each other. So here's AB, and here comes CD, crossing right through it. And it creates a right angle. Okay. You have to see that little box there to show that it's a right angle, just like we looked at when we first talked about what a right angle was. That box there tells you that you have a 90-degree angle created. So there's symbols too. We could say AB, line AB, perpendicular to CD. So here's the perpendicular sign. Okay, it's like an upside down T. Right? There are other types of line relationships we should talk about too, and that'll come up quite a bit. While we are discussing this, we should talk about the word collinear. I probably should have told you this when we talked about lines just in general. Collinear basically refers to points that are on the same line. So here's a set of collinear points. These points are collinear because you can draw a line through them. Okay? The opposite of collinear would be non-collinear. Here are 3 non-collinear points. You can't draw one straight line that connects all those 3 points. Okay? You can connect these two, or these two, or these two, but all 3 cannot be connected with the same line. So these are non-collinear. That's a little bit of a tricky word. The next one, and probably the last one we'll do for now, will be midpoint. Midpoint is just as the definition says. A midpoint is a point that divides a line, more importantly, a line segment, into two equal parts. So this is especially important when it comes to some of the work we'll be doing in another week or so. Here's our line segment. It's got some endpoints, right? Doesn't go on forever. Has a starting point and an ending point. Let's call this A, and we'll call this one C. And we'll put B in the middle there. B is going to be our midpoint. The only way that you know this is the midpoint, in fact, the way I drew it, it doesn't look like it's the exact middle. But the way you know it's the middle is there's some little marks that go here. If you see these marks, it means that this piece from A to B is the same as BC. If you know that, then B has to be the midpoint. So I could say that AB, that section, is congruent to BC. If that's the exact middle, then the two halves have to be congruent to each other. Okay? So that's it for this piece of vocab.